Get ready for the truth behind the farce. Donald Trump, the man who calls himself a leader, was exposed by his own trap at the Super Bowl. What was he really afraid of? Why did he go after Bad Bunny? The answer is shocking, and it reveals the collapse of an entire ideology. The Super Bowl spectacle of 2025 wasn't just about football. It wasn't just about the Patriots and the Seahawks battling for the most coveted title in American sports. It was about something much bigger. Something that goes beyond the lines on the field and reaches straight into the beating heart of contemporary American culture. It was about a clash between two completely opposite worldviews, two narratives fighting for the soul of a divided nation. On one side, there was Bad Bunny, the Puerto Rican phenomenon carrying the flag of inclusion, love, cultural diversity, and peaceful resistance against every form of oppression. On the other side, hidden in the shadows of Washington, shaking with fear at the thought of facing the very public he claims to represent, was Donald Trump, the man who built his political career on the flimsy foundations of fear, division, and collective resentment. While millions of people around the world watched the Super Bowl halftime show, witnessing an explosive performance that celebrated Latino culture, urban music, and the universal message that love will always be stronger than hate, Trump stayed away from the stadium. Yes, you heard that right. The President of the United States, the person who should represent all Americans, the person who should be present at the most iconic moments of the nation's culture, chose to keep his distance. But why? The official explanation was vague, packed with bureaucratic excuses and schedule conflicts. But the truth, the raw, painful truth that nobody wants to say out loud, is that Donald Trump was afraid of getting booed in public, afraid of facing the massive rejection of a crowd that no longer believes his empty promises, afraid of being humiliated on camera, broadcasting his moral defeat to the entire world. Bad Bunny's Super Bowl show wasn't just a musical performance. It was a political declaration, without needing to say a single word of traditional politics. Every beat, every movement, every carefully designed visual was a celebration of Latino identity, a proud statement that Latinos are not unwanted visitors in America, but an essential part of the cultural fabric that makes this country truly great. The energy pouring off that stage, the genuine connection between the artist and the crowd, the powerful symbolism of a young Puerto Rican commanding the most watched moment on American television. Everything about it was an existential threat to the narrative Trump and his followers have been trying to impose for years. Because let's be clear, the MAGA ideology has always depended on one fundamental premise: the idea that there is a real America and a fake America, that there are true Americans and second-class Americans, that traditional culture is being threatened by foreign forces that must be contained, suppressed, expelled. Bad Bunny, simply by existing, by achieving massive success, by being loved by millions, by representing a generation that refuses the old divisions based on race, language, or origin, shatters that narrative completely. He is living proof that diversity doesn't weaken America, it strengthens it. He is irrefutable evidence that American culture is dynamic, hybrid, constantly reinventing itself through the contributions of people from every background. And Trump knew it. He knew his presence in that stadium would be a constant reminder of his own cultural irrelevance. While Bad Bunny represented the future, vibrant and inclusive, Trump represents a past that refuses to die, clinging desperately to power that's slipping through his fingers. So he did what he always does when he feels threatened. He attacked. He attacked cowardly, from a distance, through his social media, spitting out dismissive comments about the artist, trying to shrink a performance that was universally praised by critics and audiences alike. But Trump's attack wasn't just against Bad Bunny as an individual. It was an attack on everything he represents. It was an attack on the Latino community, on urban music, on the very idea that Spanish-speaking people have just as much right to stand at the center of American culture as any other group. It was a desperate swing from someone who realizes he's losing the cultural war he himself started. And that brings us to the most pathetic conservative farce of all. Because Trump and his allies didn't settle for criticizing the official Super Bowl show. They tried to create an alternative, a counter-event that supposedly represented true American values. They organized a parallel show with Kid Rock, the mediocre musician who turned his career into a walking parody of the most vulgar, shallow brand of conservatism. The promise was grand, a spectacle that would show the world conservative culture is still relevant, still powerful, still able to compete with the mainstream they claim to despise. The result? An absolute disaster, a national embarrassment, a failure so massive that even Trump's most die-hard supporters struggled to defend it. The broadcast had technical problems from the start, the audience was practically non-existent, and what was supposed to be a display of cultural strength turned into a brutal exposure of the MAGA movement's fragility and irrelevance in popular culture. While Bad Bunny drew crowds and generated millions of positive interactions online, Kid Rock could barely hold on to a handful of viewers through a stream that repeatedly crashed and burned. The irony is delicious, but it's also deeply revealing, because what this contrast shows is that you can't manufacture cultural relevance. You can't force people to emotionally connect with an empty message held together by resentment and nostalgia for a golden past that never truly existed. Real culture emerges organically from people's lived experiences, their struggles, their joys, their hopes. Bad Bunny represents that. He came from the bottom, built his career on authentic talent and a real connection with his audience. Kid Rock, on the other hand, represents the artificial attempt to turn politics into entertainment, to replace real art with propaganda disguised as music. But the most revealing part of all was the reaction that followed Bad Bunny's show. The core message of the performance was simple and universal. Love is stronger than hate. It sounds harmless, almost cliché because it's so obviously true. I mean, who could possibly oppose the idea that we should choose love instead of hate? But to the MAGA movement, that message landed like a declaration of war, because Trump's political project has always depended on hate. Hate toward immigrants, hate toward the media, hate toward political opponents, hate toward anyone or anything that can serve as a convenient scapegoat for America's complex problems. When Bad Bunny declared that love is stronger than hate, he was essentially saying Trumpism is bankrupt, that an ideology built on division and resentment cannot ultimately prevail against a worldview grounded in unity and compassion. And the reaction was immediate and visceral. Prominent MAGA figures, those influencers who built careers worshiping Trump and spreading his lies, exploded in fury online. Laura Loomer, known for extremist positions and absurd conspiracy theories, unleashed a stream of racist and xenophobic attacks against Bad Bunny and the Latino community in general. Jake Paul, the controversial YouTuber turned fighter and far-right propagandist, wasn't far behind, pouring out his own brand of prejudice. And they weren't alone. Dozens of other conservative influencers, right-wing media personalities, and Trump-aligned politicians joined the chorus of hate, revealing exactly what Bad Bunny had exposed. Behind all the talk of traditional values and love of country, what truly drives the MAGA movement is simple, raw intolerance. What's especially shocking is how explicit these attacks were. They weren't subtle. They weren't coded. They were openly racist, openly xenophobic, openly contemptuous of people whose only offense was coming from a different cultural background. Comments about Bad Bunny not being a real American, about him not speaking English properly, about Latin music being inferior to traditional American music, as if jazz, blues, rock, country, and every other form we label American weren't themselves the result of cultural fusion, born from the mixing of African, European, Latin, and indigenous traditions. The hypocrisy is staggering. The same people who scream about free speech were the first to demand Bad Bunny be censored, banned from ever performing at major American events again. The same people who complain about cancel culture were the first to try organizing boycotts against the artist and his partner brands. The same people who claim to defend Christian values were the first to completely forget the teachings of loving your neighbor, compassion, and welcoming the stranger. Teachings that sit at the very center of Christianity. And here we arrive at the heart of the issue, the brutal truth that needs to be said clearly. Trump didn't criticize Bad Bunny because of music. Music was just the excuse, the surface-level cover for something much darker. Trump attacked Bad Bunny out of pure fear. Fear of being irrelevant in a world that's changing fast, leaving behind demagogues who profit from division. fear of unity, of organic solidarity between people of different backgrounds who refuse to be separated by the artificial lines politicians like him try to draw, fear of a culture he can't control, one that doesn't respond to his whims, that doesn't bow to his threats or intimidation. Trump built his empire, in business and in politics, on the belief that he can control the narrative, that through relentless repetition of lies, coordinated attacks, and the careful cultivation of a fanatical base willing to believe anything he says, he can shape reality in his own image. But popular culture doesn't work like that. You can't command people to like something. You can't decree what's relevant. You can't manufacture genuine emotional connection through political manipulation. Bad Bunny is popular because people genuinely connect with his music, his message, his authenticity. He didn't need an army of bots. He didn't need billionaire-funded propaganda. He didn't need threats or intimidation to get where he is. He simply created art that resonates with millions. And that, more than anything, terrifies Trump because it proves power exists beyond his control. Influence exists without his approval. A whole world exists that simply doesn't care what he thinks. The attempt to create an alternative Kid Rock show was a manifestation of that desperation for control. It was Trump trying to prove he can still set the cultural terms, still mobilize the masses, still matter in American culture. But the humiliating failure of that event, with its embarrassing technical breakdowns and painfully low viewership, exposed the truth Trump fears most. He's losing. Not just losing personal popularity, but losing the broader cultural war he believed he won in 2016. Because what the Super Bowl of 2025 represented was a moment of clarity, a moment when the country could see, side by side, two visions of America competing for its soul. One vision celebrating diversity, creativity, inclusion, and love. The other preaching homogeneity, conformity, exclusion, and fear. And when put head to head, when Americans were free to choose without the distorted filter of political propaganda, the choice was overwhelmingly clear. Trump tried to bury that reality. He tried to create alternative narratives, claiming Bad Bunny's show was a disaster, that people hated it, that it was an attack on American values. But it doesn't matter how many lies he repeats. It doesn't matter how loudly his followers scream to drown out the truth. The reality is undeniable. Millions watched and loved Bad Bunny's performance. Reviews were overwhelmingly positive. Social media erupted in celebration. The world saw it and applauded. And that's the light of truth Trump fears most. The merciless light that exposes the darkness of his attacks, reveals the moral rot at the core of his ideology, and proves his brand of hate is not shared by most Americans. No matter how much noise his most fanatical supporters make, no matter how hard they try to intimidate, threaten, and silence dissent, they cannot erase that fundamental truth. The cultural collapse of Trump-style conservatism is real and speeding up. We're not talking about genuine fiscal conservatism or legitimate debates about the size of government or serious discussions about foreign policy. We're talking specifically about the cult of personality built around Trump. This particular version of right-wing identity politics defined primarily by opposition and resentment. That movement is in cultural free fall, becoming more irrelevant to younger generations, more isolated inside smaller and smaller right-wing media bubbles. And the movement's leaders know it. You can see the desperation in their increasingly hysterical attacks, in the escalation of their rhetoric, in their growing willingness to embrace ever more extreme positions just to stay relevant. They're shouting louder because they know they're losing the audience. They're getting more outrageous because outrage is all they have left in a saturated media ecosystem. When Laura Loomer makes openly racist comments about Bad Bunny, she isn't trying to win new people over. She's feeding the already convinced base, giving them the validation of their own prejudice that they crave. When Jake Paul joins in, he isn't engaging in serious cultural debate. He's performing for a specific audience that has already decided anything associated with Trump is good and anything that opposes Trump is bad, regardless of reality. But that strategy has an expiration date. You can keep a fanatical base engaged through nonstop outrage and a sense of persecution for a while, but eventually even the most devoted begin to question whether they're on the right side of history, when they see the entire world celebrating something they're being told to hate. Cognitive dissonance has limits. At some point, people start to realize that maybe, just maybe, if everyone around them says something is beautiful and they're the only one screaming that it's horrible, the problem might be them. Bad Bunny's halftime show will be remembered as one of those defining cultural moments, a turning point that made it crystal clear America is changing, that the old guard of racial and cultural resentment is losing its grip, and that the future belongs to those who embrace diversity instead of fearing it. Trump can keep posting his impotent rage. His followers can keep inventing fake controversies and absurd conspiracies about why Bad Bunny was chosen. None of that changes the fundamental reality. Trump tried to turn the Super Bowl into another battlefield in his culture war, and he failed spectacularly. He wanted the event to be a demonstration of his power, proof that he could still rally the country against his perceived enemies. Instead, it became a demonstration of his weakness, proof of his growing irrelevance, a public exposure of the moral emptiness at the center of his movement. And the best part, the delicious irony that must keep Trump awake at night, is that Bad Bunny didn't even have to mention him. There were no explicit political attacks during the performance, no direct call-outs of Trump or his administration, just a positive celebration of culture, love, and unity. And that was enough, because when you shine a bright enough light, shadows have nowhere to hide. When you celebrate love with enough authenticity and power, hate gets exposed in all its ugliness. Trump understands power. He's spent his entire life chasing it, collecting it, exercising it. But he has never understood genuine cultural influence. He has never grasped how real art moves people in ways politics never can. He has never respected how music can unite communities that politics can only divide. He has never accepted that there are forms of power you cannot buy, steal, or intimidate into existence. Power you can only earn through talent, authenticity, and real human connection. Bad Bunny has that kind of power, and Trump knows he never will. Not no matter how many elections he wins, not no matter how many buildings he slaps his name on, not no matter how many followers his bots can generate. That knowledge eats him alive. It fuels his compulsive need to attack anyone who demonstrates the kind of genuine popularity he can only imitate through a carefully cultivated personality cult. The attacks on Bad Bunny revealed more about Trump than they ever did about their target. They revealed a deeply insecure man, desperate for constant validation, incapable of tolerating anyone else in the spotlight even for a moment. They revealed a leader so fragile that a 20-minute musical performance feels like an existential threat. They revealed an ideology so empty, it must rely on constant attacks against external scapegoats because it has nothing positive or constructive to offer. And they revealed the real face of his most devoted followers. The people who immediately resorted to racist and xenophobic insults weren't random trolls. They were prominent MAGA figures, people with massive platforms and real influence inside conservative circles. Their willingness to say the quiet part out loud proves the toxicity of Trumpism isn't an accident or a distortion of real conservatism. It's the core of the movement. It's the fuel that keeps the machine running. Because when you strip away the shallow talk of traditional values and economic prosperity, when you peel back the layers of propaganda and PR, what's left at the center of Trumpism is this: resentment from people who feel they're losing status in a changing society, fear of demographic and cultural shifts they can't stop, and a desire to punish those they see as responsible for their discomfort. Bad Bunny, successful, confident, unapologetically Latino, represents everything they fear and resent. So they attack. They lie about him not being really American, as if Puerto Rico weren't a U.S. territory, as if Puerto Ricans weren't U.S. citizens, as if Latino contributions to American culture weren't as old and foundational as any other. They insult his music, as if musical taste determines human worth or cultural legitimacy. They invent conspiracies, as if an artist simply existing and succeeding must be explained by something sinister instead of talent and work. But those attacks don't achieve what they're meant to. They don't diminish Bad Bunny. They don't erase the impact of his performance. They don't undo the cultural influence he continues to have. All they do is expose the moral ugliness of the people making them. Every racist tweet, every xenophobic comment, every attempt to belittle or delegitimize his success only reinforces the very message Bad Bunny was communicating. Hate is destructive, divisive, and ultimately weaker than love. And the more they attack, the more clearly people see it. Every time someone like Laura Loomer or Jake Paul spews prejudice, more fence-sitters decide they don't want to be associated with that toxicity. Every time Trump posts outrage over some imagined insult, more people see a petty bully instead of the strong leader he pretends to be. Every time the MAGA movement chooses hate over love, division over unity, resentment over hope, it loses another piece of its potential base. Because most people, when truly faced with the choice, don't want to live in constant rage and fear. They don't want to wake up every day hunting for new enemies to hate, new scapegoats to blame, new controversies to rage over. They want to live, enjoy music, celebrate culture, connect with others, build instead of destroy. And when they see a performance like Bad Bunny's offering exactly that, joy, connection, creativity, and then they see politicians and influencers attacking it with such fury, they start to wonder who's really on the wrong side. That's the collapse Trump is trying to hide. Not a single dramatic moment, but a steady, unstoppable erosion. More and more people realizing an ideology built on hate doesn't satisfy them, doesn't improve their lives in meaningful ways, and doesn't build the future they want for their children. Bad Bunny's Super Bowl show simply accelerated and made visible what has been happening for years. Share this truth. Show the manipulation and hate behind Trump's words. Show how a man so weak, so insecure, so driven by fear has to attack an artist whose crime was celebrating love and culture. Expose the hypocrisy of a movement that claims to defend American values while attacking American citizens for refusing to conform to a narrow, exclusionary idea of who deserves to be called a real American. Shine a light on the prejudice hiding behind America First rhetoric. The truth can't be censored, no matter how hard Trump and his allies try. They can block people online, build isolated platforms, seal themselves inside echo chambers that keep reality out. But they can't stop people from seeing with their own eyes, hearing with their own ears, feeling in their own hearts the difference between a message of love and a message of hate. Bad Bunny won, not because he defeated Trump in any formal contest, but because he proved there is more power in bringing people together than tearing them apart, more strength in celebrating diversity than fearing it, more future in embracing change than clinging desperately to the past. He won because millions around the world watched his performance and felt hope, joy, and connection, while Trump's attacks produced only exhaustion, sadness, and more division. And that victory, more than any election result or political headline, is the greatest threat to Trumpism, because it proves the future does not belong to merchants of fear and division. It belongs to those who can inspire, unite, and uplift. Trump can hold office, control government machinery, rally followers to protest and disrupt, but he can't compete in culture. He can't win hearts and minds with hate. He can't build a lasting legacy on resentment and prejudice. This is the collapse we're witnessing. This is the truth that was revealed. This is the farce that was exposed. And no amount of angry tweeting, no failed Kid Rock counter show, no absurd conspiracy about hidden agendas can reverse or hide this fundamental reality. The emperor has no clothes, and everyone can see it.